Hello and welcome everyone. It's Suzanne here from the Project Manager Clinic, and I'm with Margaret Dos Santos again today, and we're looking at solo project managers. You're feeling inadequate, wondering whether you're really a project manager because you're solo. This presentation is going to go through some of the ifs and buts about this and give you some tips if you are working solo at the moment and wondering how to cope. So, Margaret, here we are again. Margaret is also, I must say, people not from the Project Manager Clinic. She's a consultant in her own right. Her details are at they will be in the link below for the webinar, and also the presentation will be on the website, so you'll be able to download that. And we're just going to get going. So, Margaret, if you're a solo PM, you're not alone.
That's
There
right.
are others.
That's right. And I loved getting this question, and I love answering these Q&A mentoring questions for the Project Manager Clinic. And it's so interesting what people come up with. And I have to say, this one was a bit of I had to think, wow, solo project manager. So I actually went back down to the definition of what is a project manager, and I really went back to the PMBOK guide. And, and just referring back to the PMBOK guide, the definition of a project manager is it leads the project team to meet the project objectives and stakeholders' expectations. And the project manager works to balance the competing constraints on the project with the resources available. So the project manager is really hired or basically included into a project to actually communicate, manage stakeholders, basically integrate the different parties that are particular to the project. And so they're actually integrating all of the project team members together to make sure that communication is flowing and everything is, basically everyone knows what's going on. So the fact that a project manager has been hired to be a solo project manager, then I thought about in my life and experiences, when has this happened? And sometimes organizations do hire individual project managers to manage a project, to implement something, but usually they are the subject matter experts at a particular thing. So it might be that there has to be a new website that's put in, and this person is a developer and can be able to set up a new website and manage the cost, manage the vendor, and ensure that all of the work for the new website is actually done. But typically the project manager would not be a solo. They might be a subject matter expert where they're actually doing the actual website themselves, but they're actually doing the work, managing the cost themselves, and not necessarily need to hire anyone. I would say that that person then is really not a manager in the right sense, but they're a subject matter expert.
According to that definition, absolutely.
Yeah, a subject matter expert, and they're just doing some project work. And so a lot of organizations do that to save on costs, so they don't have to hire two people. For example, a subject matter expert and potentially a project manager to manage the work.
Or a BA and a project manager. And there's a little bit of a gotcha that we talked about with this before with the solo project manager. But one of the reasons we're talking about this subject is because it's the Q&A mentor session. And the question that we actually got was from somebody who was hired as a project manager for a small company. And during the interviews, they were told they would most likely be working alone, so without a team. So they were asking really that, is this correct? Because they found it quite challenging, as they'd always thought that a project manager had a team, which is basically the definition that you just gave us, Margaret. But like I said, there are some gotchas and there are some differences, aren't there, in terms of where that project is?
That's right. And I have mentioned the reasons why organisations might do that. It's usually to save costs.
Yeah.
And also just be aware, I know that working in the industry, it's a typical known fact that when you are actually managing the work as a project manager and you're actually doing the work as well, typically what happens is you don't do well at both. And
Mm.
so it's important to know that, you know, if you're focusing on the subject matter expertise, that someone else is, you know, doing the communication between the different groups or sponsors or
Yeah. And we know that this is a thing that happens where a project manager is either undervalued or project management in an organisation is misunderstood. Quite often, they think a technical person can manage a project. They are totally different skills, really. And in my experience, a lot of technical people say, I don't want to manage anything. I just want to stay with my technical stuff. But also in my experience, it is, well, you're the project manager, you can do the BA stuff as well. Well, yes, I can probably do the BA, but I'm not going to do it as well as a BA. And a BA is
ex-
not going to do mine either as well,
exact
you know.
exactly. And I've heard different recruiters even come to me and saying that they've got someone that's in the project manager position,
Yeah,
but they're very good technically, but they
yeah,
can't communicate. So, and that's my point
yeah. And
about
that's critical.
that is
Yeah,
critical. A project
absolutely
manager,
critical.
that is one of the main, you know, things that a project manager needs to be able to do well is to
Yeah,
communicate,
yeah,
because they're communicating upwards to the sponsors and the governance board. They're communicating sideways to auditors, legal, anyone else that's kind of giving advisory,
yeah,
and they're communicating to their team, the subject matter experts, the other, you know, team members in the group. It might be a change analyst or a change or a BA, or some of the, you know, technical people, developers. There might be some technical people that are in the group that they need to communicate to. So, you know, there is a vast portion of a project manager is communication.
yeah, yeah. And having their finger on multiple pulses at once. It's interesting that the definition is about managing people because we all project manage our own lives in a way. We're all project managing something in our own lives. But we sort of touched on this at the start. Um, if you're at the start of a project, you may be engaged as the project manager, particularly if it's like the business case has got to be done or something like that. And then, so you're pretty much by yourself at the time, no team, but you will have stakeholders, you will have SMEs, you'll have a whole raft of people that you have to engage with. And then as you move forward, you will probably start to build your team. I've often been engaged just as the lone project or program manager because I'm working out what has to be done and building the roadmap um, or the project. So if you're by yourself as a project manager, and we sort of touched on this a little bit before, um, but what are some of the things that you would have to consider? Like we've got in the presentation, you know, you're still leading an initiative, right? You may start off by yourself, but you're going to build something. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to build a team? You still need that management skill in order to understand how I'm going to build a team, you know.
Exactly. And at that point, you are the solo project manager, but not for long,
Yep.
because
Mm.
you're still building your team. And I've also been engaged at the beginning of the project or the program
Yeah.
where you are asked to set up your team. And so you've then got to work out what resources you need to complete this project and build your team. And so you're either hiring for the team members that, or you're actually obtaining some existing resources that are part of the business,
Yeah.
but you know, their expertise is needed for them to do some project work. And
Mm.
so you are at that point a solo project manager, but you're not going to be a solo project manager really for the entire project.
No, but when you're solo at the start, the different tools and techniques of a project manager come into play. So you really have to collaborate. You really have to facilitate. You have to influence. And I don't know that influencing is really a project management dimension or skill in the PMBOK, but certainly at that first stage, you have to um, be the champion in a way for the project if you're right at the start. With the sponsor, yes, and maybe you've got a project board or something, but you're the front face of that project. So you're probably relying on a different skill set within your project management tool set at that point than you would if you're further on in the project.
Exactly. And I think influencing is a skill that you would definitely need at that point, especially
Yeah.
if you are trying to hire resources or influence the sponsors or senior stakeholders
Yeah.
as to which resources you actually need and why you want to spend that much on a particular resource. I think that that's really valuable, a valuable skill.
It is a valuable skill. And, we sort of have to be change managers at that point too. Very few of us get a change manager at the start.
Exactly.
And that's sort of a luxury that they come in and they identify all the stakeholders and all of that stuff. But at the start, we don't often have that. So we have to be a bit resilient, I guess, in ourselves as a solo project manager. We're going to talk a little bit about that as we move forward. But one thing, we did some research, didn't we, Margaret? And there were some differing opinions out there about what is a solo project manager. Well, if you Google it, there's quite a few things that come up. There's some hybrid models and the future with AI and things like that. But how do you think, Margaret, that these things will be affected in the future? And what was your take from some of the research?
So, I mean, it does refer to saying that, that the solo project manager might exist, but I still believe that the project manager is a collaborator,
Yeah.
will actually be needed to communicate to the various stakeholders, bring people together, bring ideas to the table so that it's all shared, it's all done at the same time. And it's not this solo project manager going off and being basically siloed. It's not a
Yeah.
silo position.
It's not a
It's
solo
it's
position.
it's a strategic and it's a visionary position,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it needs to be able to communicate, collaborate, integrate between all the different parties that are part and parcel of a project.
Now, it's interesting that you say that it's a strategic, almost a strategic, it's a strategic and visionary role, particularly when you're doing transformation. Everybody seems to be doing business transformation now. Don't know why, but anyway. And yet project management is always looked at as a delivery mechanism, which of course it is a delivery mechanism, but it's certainly at the start and certainly at a program level, it is much more strategic. And I would argue that even as a delivery mechanism, and the way I always do it is you have to have a project strategy or a project approach of how you're going to deliver that project.
Absolutely, exactly. And the project manager wears so many hats.
Yeah.
They implement change. They can be the enabler of change, especially if the change part might be minor and it doesn't warrant you to hire a specialist change manager. They are the specialist they are the enabler to procure. So it might be services, it might be actual software, it might be if you're in construction, you're procuring other contractors, and they are also the delivery
Yeah.
person. So they ensure that delivery is actually done, and they ensure that everything is closed and it's all quality, tested and made sure that it's right to go for implementation. So they
Yeah.
wear many hats. They're a mentor. They are it's a visionary position, or strategic position, and so they are able to communicate with the various, CEOs, C-suites, and senior managers. They are able to influence and basically get stuff done.
Look, we've talked about this a couple of times, I think, in some of these webinars about the changing face of project management as we move in, particularly to AI, and is it still going to be relevant, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it still will be relevant. Maybe different skill sets will be used, and we might talk about that at another time. But I've worked with people who have started their own companies, becomes a CEO of a reasonable sized company, and they were a project manager. And they wonder why they're struggling as a CEO. And it's interesting, what you were saying. Project manager has to look very broad brush across a lot of things, but not all project managers do, and not all organisations hire someone that will do that. And this solo project manager, keeping them almost in a box. I had an experience just recently where it was an agile environment, and one of the executives just thought that the project manager did the governance stuff and the admin. Like, but when push came to shove and things weren't being delivered, who did they go to? They went to the project manager. Well, you can't go to a project manager if you're going to treat them in that role. In fact, that's not a project manager role either. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about what a project manager is. And that in some of that research, there's these hybrid roles that people talked about. There's a collaboration between Agile and AI that will take over. Thought that was interesting. Instead of instead of your solo project manager, I don't know how AI could consolidate a whole lot of information like a project manager does. Because we're reading documents where we're talking to people, there's a whole lot of stuff that we're doing. It could be possible, I don't know.
That's right. And I can't see AI actually navigating the political agendas, the communication between other, parties where information is actually not
True.
available in public.
Yeah.
So you've actually got to talk to them to find out what's going on,
Mm.
and, making sure that everyone's being catered for. And that's why you have stakeholders. That's why you have as RACI, make sure that
True.
everyone's being included. And it's very simple. Like, I see a lot of issues that happen is because simply the roles and responsibilities were not defined.
Not
And
done. That's right.
not
And we did that RACI webinar just recently. The link will be up the top of this video, so people will be able to go and have a look at that. Such a powerful tool, and we've talked about that before. And often as a solo project manager, or when you're starting, say doing the business case, you may be doing the RACI. Well, if you're a good project manager, you probably will. But you're by yourself quite often. So you have to reach out, like you're saying. But some of these things may come at a cost. And for the person that was asking the question, they found it quite challenging and confusing. And some of our research also showed that people that are a solo project manager, so without any visible team, are potentially being overworked. And you touched on this a bit, Margaret, where they're expected to be this, that, and the other. So there's a challenge of being solo. So we talk a little bit about that now, Margaret, if you don't mind. There was a little bit about work-life balance and being clear, but in a way, that's like a throwaway line that it's nice to say, but what does it actually mean? And how do people actually do it when they've got the pressure and expectation of them being a project manager?
Well, I mean, I think that that's a good question for any sort of role that you do, but
Mm,
particularly project managers that, there's a deadline, a project needs to be put in. It might be a compliance project, or it might
yeah,
be, a different sort of project where, if we don't put it in by a certain date, then a massive amount of cost is going to be put on to the business or the project. And so there is sometimes that pressure to, get a lot of things done by a certain time or date.
yeah,
And so that's probably why you might find that when a project manager is in the thick of an actual project and trying to deliver this particular project, that they will try and work, extensive hours to try and meet the deadline, especially if, they've had to deal with issues or
yes,
blockers,
yes, yeah.
and in the meantime and try and, meet this deadline.
So you're saying this is not just for solo project managers. This can happen to anybody. So we need to talk to how we can avoid that, which we'll do in a minute. But if people watching are liking what they're seeing, please subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up below. So we love doing these and bringing you this information because I'm sure it does help. Project management is actually quite complex. And the more you get into it, the more exciting it becomes. So some of the things that we talked about or was talked about in the research and we came up with was building strong relationships and and being a little bit flexible with how you use your project management tools. So maybe not being, and I don't quite know how to say this, maybe being a little bit more pragmatic uh, and and working through, well, what is the issue and what do I apply to this? Can I skip this? Come back to it later? What do I need to do? What's the priority that I'm needing to work through as this person? Set boundaries and develop robust handover processes, which was one thing. Use your project management toolset and learn how to delegate. If you don't already know how to delegate. I mean, a manager should know how to delegate.
Exactly, and that's why they're a project manager. That's the whole position. That's their position.
Yeah,
They
yeah, but
should
how
be
many
able to.
don't?
I know.
Lots don't. Uh, it
And
just
so
staggers me, that there are people out there that are employed and yet don't know how to use these skills. But then that's
and
why we're here.
and that's actually a good point that you said that, they're probably not delegating,
Yeah,
because and that also partly goes up to the roles and responsibilities. Once
yeah,
the roles and responsibilities are set, there is no question why you're delegating a particular piece of work if the
yeah,
project manager really is not meant to be doing it. And that's
yes,
the expectations of a lot of people in project teams, where they believe, well, there's a project manager, they should be doing everything. And the project manager
yes,
does not do everything.
no.
So, and a lot of people expect that. And it
And
might have been,
And some of
yes,
the, in my experience, a lot of project management managers are scared to ask for what they need. I need to do this. This is the work that we need to get through in the project. Um, I need to get these sorts of skills, sponsor. Um, have we got them? Can I get them from within the organisation? If not, well, we're going to have to hire. And if they start pushing back, well, you say, well, okay, we can't do that or we can't have that in scope. But most, not most, I shouldn't say that, a lot of project managers, they won't say no. They'll do it themselves, which is what you were saying. They just work and work and work.
well, that's right. And I mean, that's not the right thing to do. You've got to set boundaries.
Yes,
You've got to have your blinkers on for ensuring that you're in your own, doing your own work, because then what will happen is as soon as you start doing other people's work, then there is going to be that expectation that everyone will want
absolutely.
you to do their work too. And a project
Yeah.
manager does not do everybody's work.
No, and we've got in the slides, set boundaries and stick to them. It's really important, and we've referred to work-life balance in the presentation, But if you have boundaries and you stick to them, it's what tool do you need to now employ? What project management tool do you need to employ if somebody's pushing back on those boundaries? Is it risk management? Is it issues management? Is it a scope creep? Is it negotiation? Is it some sort of communication skill? Pretty much whatever it is, you've already got those tools in your project management kit, but you just need to, rifle through the kit and come up with the right tool. And sometimes it does take us you to say no, we can't do that because of this. But this is a way through it, so don't have to be argumentative, but we have to be able to set boundaries and stick to them. We need to embrace the power of self-care, absolutely. Mindfulness, spiritual depth, exercise. Family's important. Make sure you're not killing team members. And I've said this to people, sponsors in the past, I'm not killing people for this. No, I'm just not. And when I've had, this is quite a few years ago now, probably 20 years ago, I had people proudly say to me, I worked 72 hours last week. Well, why? Like something is wrong if you're working 72 hours on this project. We need to go and work out why that is, because we've got to drop something.
Yeah, that's right.
We can't do everything and shouldn't do everything, which was to your point from earlier.
That's right. And I think that that's the misconception, is that a lot of people think that we've got a project manager, they can do it. And and that's not the skill set of a project manager is to do everything.
Yeah.
But it is the project manager's responsibility to ensure that if there's an issue or there's a risk, that's addressed, that it's, rectified, that it's mitigated or eliminated, that, whatever comes up, that it's addressed.
And that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point, because whilst they don't do everything, they need to make sure that everything that needs to be done is being done. If things that can't be done, then that's another project technique that you have to deal with, why you can't do those things. And it's not you personally that can't deliver everything. Sometimes, the organisation just doesn't have the people, doesn't have the maturity, doesn't have the capability, doesn't have the money, whatever it is. You don't have to take it all on your own shoulders.
That's right. And sometimes, a project manager might be working extra hours for things that are unforeseen, such as team members that resign from that position. And then the project manager has got to go out and source another resource. And it might be that they have to start from scratch where they're actually hiring. And, the project manager might be already, running around, talking to people, stakeholders, communicating, collaborating, identifying risks, mitigating them, eliminating them, finding issues, removing them. But then in addition, you've got to, start looking at recruiting and hiring. And so that adds another additional added time pressure to actually making sure that, things are moving, things are getting done, and the project is not stalled.
Well, that's an important point, that projects aren't stalled because you've run up against a brick wall with resources. And while you were talking a little bit about that, I did a post, a YouTube thing the other day about project managers should always be involved in the recruitment of their resources, because it mitigates risk and they're on your project. Sometimes you don't get a choice. You're just given those people, but you need to be aware of what's going on. But in most organisations, and in my experience, I'm not personally the recruiter. I'm involved in the recruitment, but I'm not out there putting the ads out and doing that. I mean, sometimes I write the position description because I know exactly what I want in the org chart, because I'm by myself at the time. I'm a solo program manager building the transformation program. But this person in the example and the question that we've got there, we don't know where they're at in the phase of what they're doing. Whether or not people, as they slowly build a team, are doing too much, they're getting too involved in recruitment, I don't know, because it is time consuming, you know.
That's right, and that's my point. That's why the project manager may not see the work-life balance, because they might have to address unforeseen, issues or risks that come up that, need to be addressed to keep the project moving, to keep the delivery going, to make
Yeah.
sure that, you address all the benefits, that the benefits are, basically crystallized.
And look, I guess if we're thinking risk as well, the solo project manager could potentially become a key person risk, because they need to identify what they're giving to the project. And if they're doing too much and they get overwhelmed and suddenly leave, that's a risk to the project. So they're a key person risk. So how would they deal with that if it was somebody else and not them? If it was a technical person like an enterprise architect or something, you would know that risk, you would identify it, and you would have mitigation strategies. But do solo project managers have mitigation strategies for themselves? Maybe not.
Maybe not, and that's an interesting conundrum that you've just mentioned there. And I try and keep close with the sponsor. So the
Yeah.
sponsor is always aware what I'm up to, what I'm doing. And, it's important to have that relationship with the sponsor, because then the sponsor, if indeed, the project manager does leave
Yeah.
and there is the gap there where the project manager is absent, then the sponsor knows exactly where the project is at,
Very true.
what needs to be done. And I've actually been in that position, not where I have resigned, but one of my colleagues has resigned
Mm,
1 month to go live
wow.
for a
Yeah.
massive accounts payable centre of excellence overseas. And I was given a month and I was asked to step in that project manager's shoes and basically complete the project. So
Mm,
I had to, she was based in Melbourne. I had to fly to Melbourne and I spent a week understanding where we were at with the different parts of the project, and basically ensure that this particular piece of work was going to be implemented, and the go live was going to go live on that date that we said that we were going to go live on.
yeah. Look, it's difficult. That we've all had to deal with that sort of situation. But again, if you're proactive as a solo project manager or any project manager, for example, you will have all your ducks in a row pretty much so that you can hand over. And people used to say to me, well, what do you do as a program director? And I'd say, I drink coffee and talk to people. Right, really? Because I'd done all the stuff. I'd set it all up. Everybody knew what they were doing. There were the status reports and all of that, but there was enough information that if I stepped out, because I had my own company, if I stepped out, I could put one of my consultants in there to take over without much of a ripple at all. But a lot of people seem to think that they have to be irreplaceable, but that's not really, I wouldn't think, the best way of doing project management. Because for me, a project manager is setting up the project or the activity to deliver and managing through all of those different components that get us from A to B. The easiest way possible, really, is the best. We talked a little bit about building networks and influencing, but we also should touch on building team. You like building a support network, and some of the sort of areas that you can do are, like the AIPM or the PMI, where there's, other project managers. There are project managers probably in your own organisation. There are places, of course, like the Project Manager Clinic, where you can get people like me as your coach, project manager coach, to get you through. There are usually places you can go, but you need to ask. Now, Margaret, in your experience, do they ask people? Do they mostly ask?
I I have found that sometimes people are a bit hesitant to ask, but
Yeah,
if you don't ask, you don't get
true.
usually.
Yeah,
So one way of getting something is to ask. And
yeah,
I've got a long time mentor myself, which I've had for many years,
yeah.
and I saw her in a training course as an independent consultant, and I thought she'd be absolutely perfect for me as a mentor. I'm going
Yeah.
to ask whether she can mentor me. And she said yes. And we have been close friends, and she's mentored me throughout my entire project management career. And I'm so indebted to her. I think feel that, you know, the valuable lessons that I've learnt from her has
Yeah.
been too much to even really say it here.
Yeah.
And the thing was that I didn't know if she could be my mentor or if she was going to be my mentor, but I took the leap of faith and I basically just took her out for a coffee and I asked her.
Yeah.
And and most people are willing to help,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. And people always want to help, so it's going to be hard for them to say no. Sometimes there might be things in their life that might stop them from wanting to mentor you,
Yeah.
but if you don't ask, you don't know.
You
So,
don't know exactly.
and
And
there's no harm.
there's no harm. And, one of the things that I think about the work that I'm doing in coaching people and project optimization that it differs quite a bit from leadership training and also mentoring because um, I've had so much experience with project managers. For whatever reason, they are hesitant to speak up. And you first think, why are they even in that role? But when I'm able to then say, now, this is your project management technique, and this is the tool that you use, already they start to feel better about it. Then it's the coaching them as to, now, how do you apply that tool? How are you going to communicate that to your stakeholders? If there's somebody that's, there's a conflict somewhere, how are you going to approach that? So it is bigger, obviously, than just the tools and technique. But I often find it's very interesting digging down with people as to what they're hesitant about, why they're not asking. Because as you said, just a simple cup of coffee, sometimes you're not alone then, are you?
That's right. And it's an interesting point that you've just said, because I have found that people are hesitant to speak up. And it may not necessarily be other project managers, but it's team members within the project team. And it's
Yes.
usually a culture thing
Yep.
where their culture might be that they don't speak up, that if there's someone that's more senior than them, or there's someone, there's a hierarchy,
Mm,
that they don't speak up because it's the people in the hierarchy that speak. And it's a cultural thing that
yes.
I have
It
found.
is.
And
Yes.
so I always, if that's the case in a team discussion, I always ask them directly in the team if they have anything else to add, for example.
Yep.
And that way, and it's usually valuable. They're just too scared to speak up.
They're too
So,
scared. Yep. Exactly. Look, this is something we should talk about at another time. There's so many things to talk about, Margaret.
yeah.
I've got a whole list, right, of things. But there's something in aviation called cockpit management. And also that's quite a cultural thing, but it applies across the board. And as you were talking about that, it really applies in project management because we have a team, it's very hierarchical. In cockpit management, the pilot, who is the captain, is the one that everybody's always deferred to. And even when the second mate or whatever they're called can see that something is going to happen, this is in the past, they won't speak up because the captain is the one that knows everything. So cockpit management was developed to get around that so that the other people in the team are able to voice their concerns. So something that we should discuss in project management.
Exactly.
We might do that. We'll set up another session for that. But again, people watching, subscribe. Love to have more subscribers. I can keep bringing you this content as we get more subscribers. And we like doing this. These webinars because it's good to bring this information to people. It's not just technical project management training. This is really how do you apply your project technique, which is often not talked about that I've found. But Margaret, in summary, I'm just going to read what's on the slide and then come back to you to get you to summarise. So what I had was relax and enjoy the experience. Remember, Suzanne, that's me, 3 rules of project management. And there's a video on that as well. Rule 1, don't panic. Rule 2, say no when no is required. And rule 3 is have fun. Now, it's circular. You can keep going back, but watch the video and you'll find out a bit more about that. In summary, use your project management tools and techniques. Be flexible. Reach out to your tribe, be inclusive with other people around you, collaborate, actively promote your project so people know what's going on, they know who to talk to. It's really important, this stuff. Don't be afraid to ask for help and get a project coach. Now, Margaret, what have you got to summarise?
I think in summary, a solo project manager is typically probably not a project manager, but probably an SME, especially if they've been asked to do a solo project on their own for the entire project.
Yeah.
And as we discussed in terms of the definition of what a project manager is, and, it is challenging for the project manager if they're going to be doing the work and managing as well, because typically the project manager would manage resources, would manage the team, would manage, budget. And so it will be challenging for them to basically do both things. And usually they will, it's a known fact that typically if you're doing both, you will usually fail at both. You're either going to be good at one and not the other, or good at the other and not, the other.
Yeah.
A project manager has to be good at communicating, collaborating, integrating, ensuring that the delivery is being done, all the moving parts, and at the end of the day, that the benefits are realised as part of implementation of the project.
Yeah, exactly. And look, if anybody has more questions or would like to contact myself or Margaret, the links will be in the description below on the YouTube channel, or you can contact me via the website, and Margaret too, if I can pass that on. That's www.pmclinic.com.au. There is lots of detail on the YouTube channel. Again, thank you, Margaret. It's been another fantastic Ask a Mentor session. We get some interesting things, that's for sure. As you said, makes us think about stuff. And we do work on this. So it's, whilst a lot of it is coming out of our heads as experienced project managers, we do some research and work on it, and then the resources will be loaded up to the website so people can use them and hopefully get some benefit.
Thank you.
So
and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh yeah, Margaret,
and look forward to answering the next questions.
The next question, which will be the same sort of time next month. And those details will be up on the website as well. So hopefully you'll join us then. Don't forget, subscribe, give us a thumbs up if you like what you've seen, and have a great project day.